Okay, today we are going to be reading the lyrics and text of O Fortuna.
As a music teacher, I didn't really know what closed text reading was until taking the courses with text and context.
And I think that if we understand what the text is really saying, it's going to help our performance of the piece.
Having experienced it, having it being modeled to me as a student, as a learner in a variety of different texts and fiction and nonfiction, I thought about the fact that we're playing a piece that has a text accompanied to it and that a composer had set the music to that text. And I thought that it would be really powerful for the students to analyze that text so that they can make those connections to their performance in the music as well.
Who spoke Latin? Do you know who spoke Latin? Andrew?
Rome.
Rome did, good. And where else did they speak Latin? In the church, right? Think about, prayers you might know, or church you might know. Ave Maria. A lot of things are actually in Latin.
I think content learning for teachers is extremely helpful because it brings us back to the role of a student. And when we're often presented professional development, it is given to us already as teachers. So it's incredible to be able to be a student and to really experience what we expect our students to experience.
I want you to listen to the piece, and you have the text in front of you, or you can follow along on the screen if you can see it. And while you're listening, I want you to look at the text and think. I want you to put your ELA hat on. And I want you to think about literary devices that you might see being used in the text. Put your earth science hat on, 8th graders, and think about connections that you see in earth science. Put your Spanish or French hats on as well, and think about words that you see connections to from the languages that you've studied. Think about 6th grade social studies, and think about what you know of the Middle Ages. So as we listen to this text, think about all those things. With your pencils, I want you to circle things or take notes in the margins, things that you're going to share with us that you noticed. So if you find a literary device or you see a reference to something you learned about, I want you to share that with us. Okay, so let's listen.
Using this close reading process as a way to provide these linkages for them adds a lot more value and depth to them even studying an instrument. That everything we do is not in isolation, that everything we do and everything we learn is connected, and then that itself imprints more deeply into their brain and into their learning background.
And this particular piece was created around the 12th century, so around the same time. What do you notice about this? Okay, so you notice that the wheel looks just like the phases of the moon, right? And the poet talks about that, doesn't he? Or she. What do they say about the phases of the moon? Or how do they use that to compare it to fortune, Ashley? What do you think?
The discussions that we're having in the orchestra center around what the text is saying, but they have to bring in what they've learned in 6th grade social studies. They have to bring in what they've learned in 8th grade earth science. They talk about the waxing and the waning moon within the poetry. And so we're going to be connecting all of those things together. Juliana, what did you notice? Crescendo and decrescendo. So what does a waxing moon eventually become? A full moon, and a waning moon eventually becomes a new moon. So crescendo, just like in music, gets bigger, decrescendo gets softer. Cool.
Well, it helps us get a feeling of what everybody was feeling back then, and then we can use that to relate to other subjects such as science and math, and that helps us almost realize what exactly they were feeling.
What type of literary device is the poet using here? Why would you put poverty and power together? Jillian, what do you think?
Fate chooses whether you'll be in poverty or not.
Poverty or power, fate makes that decision, right? And what's interesting about putting those two words together, Maya? Oxymorons, right? You're juxtaposing two pretty big opposites. So no matter if you're powerful and rich or really poor and weak, do you have control over that? Not really.
It helps me in other classes because I can look at texts and stuff that maybe aren't in the same language and kind of understand.
Sophie? Simile. Why use a simile here?
And glacium is like a glacier, which is like ice.
Sure. How many of you take French? What's the word for ice in French? Glace, right? So we're seeing those that all of these language come from Latin, right? Great. So why use ice though?
If we have the context and the history, then we can actually kind of show it. We can move more, and we can add more dynamics.
Why use ice? What do you think, Katie? Sure. If you're growing up in Europe in the 1200s, would you have seen ice before? Yeah, you bet you would have. Did you know that there actually was a mini ice age during most of the Middle Ages? So it was actually really cold. It was so cold they couldn't grow crops very well. So people were hungry a lot and poor and dying and sick. It was not the best time to be alive.
He taught us what text actually meant, and that gave us like a deeper understanding of like what everyone was feeling back when like the poems were first written. And that really helped us like understand the entire piece and helped us play better as well.
What we're doing with my students in reading this text from medieval Europe, we have to consider what was going on at that time and why would these pre-service monks be writing about love and debauchery when they're about to enter this life of servitude to God, and why would they talk about fate?
It helps me think more about what's actually going on and how maybe the monks felt during that time period.
Sors imanis et inanis rota tu volubilis status malus vana salus. Do you notice anything? Anything that's repeated? Sakrithi, what do you notice?
Well, I was just going to say that like rota sounds like rotate.
Rota sounds like rotate. Good. Do we see anything?
Some of the words ended in US.
All of those words ended in S sound, right? Why would he or she end every single line in an S there? What is that connecting us back to? It's a rhyme. And what's the power in that? Think about what the text is about. Makes it harsher. Good, that sound. No matter what it starts as, everything ends the same, right? Just like your destiny, just like your fate. We can't assume that all educators are comfortable or familiar with close text reading, and we can't only train ELA teachers to be those responsible to implement these standards. Wheel of Fortune, how else? Can you think of other ways that we have used games and used this type of wheel? Other games? The game of life, the actual board game of life.
Well, Mr. Gammiero used like pictures and visuals, and he had translation so we could understand the text better and relate to it easier.
They're more motivated, they give me more effort. At 9 a.m. in the morning, they're more willing to engage with it. When I teach 70 kids at one time, so that's 70 different learning styles. So if I'm able to present a lesson that offers a variety of different disciplines and connections, I'm much more likely to hit on more of those kids' individual learning styles. But what are some of the things Carl Orff did to make this text come alive? What are some of the decisions that he made? Maya?
There's a lot of contrast, like with dynamics.
Lots of contrast and dynamics, right? So maybe a play off of the opposites they talk about with fate. It's both soft and loud. What else? Claire?
It's faster and more intense.
It gets faster and more intense, and does the text also do that as well? Yeah, sure.
Well, it helps us like understand other people's feelings, so it makes us like almost have more like empathy towards them when they're feeling sad or something. So it helps us like understand them better.
Think about the text while you're playing. Think about what this piece is about. Try to express that to your audience. Don't just play the notes, but think about what these notes are connected to. And this should bring you all the way back to the 12th century. Ready? Watch Sophie and Michael. Go ahead. I've done this piece before, and they've never been excited about it. And they're really now much more excited about it and surprised at the connections that we're making. They would never expect to discuss science concepts in their orchestra class or to discuss what they learned 2 years ago in social studies while holding a violin.